today is the appearance day of Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura. In Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, we've been discussing the descendants or the family line of Kardama Muni. He'll become married to Devahuti and they have children. Their main child that we will be focused on will be, of course, Kapila, who will speak the Sankhya philosophy. But that we've been talking about up to this point. The topic today, which is about Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura, is one I have to confess I don't have much knowledge about, but I always like the opportunity to speak about something that I have never really made any investigation into and don't have a lot of prior knowledge, so I hope I can be forgiven if I make some mistakes here. But in the Caitanya Charitamrita, in Adi Lila, in chapter 11, we hear about the Nityānanda tree. So in chapter 10, we hear about the tree of the descendants, or the Lord Chaitanya is described as a tree that spreads love of Godhead, and it has many branches and sub-branches. And so those have been described, and now we're describing as is called a very heavy branch of the Chaitanya tree called Nityānanda. So this Nityānanda branch, one aspect of the Nityānanda branch is the 12 Gopalas. So Nityānanda is evidently in the mood of the cowherd boys. So these 12 Gopalas that are associated with Nityānanda are all various cowherd boys in Krishna's pastime, which is kind of different. We usually hear about the gopis and all this, but when discussing Nityānanda, we hear a lot about this line of cowherd boys and who these different 12 Gopalas were in Krishna Lila. So I'm going to take a tip from our Ram Roy, who usually when he discusses something like this, he goes to the CC itself, and we'll read some of these explanations. Particularly we'll read the explanation of Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura. So here we are in CC Adi 11. This is the summary. As the branches and sub-branches of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were described in the 10th chapter, in this 11th chapter, the branches and sub-branches of Nityananda Prabhu are similarly listed. So here's one. After offering my obeisances to all the devotees of Sri Nityānanda Prabhu, who are like bumblebees collecting honey from his lotus feet, I shall try to describe those who are most prominent. All glories to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Anyone who has taken shelter at his lotus feet is glorious. All glories to Sri Advaita Prabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, and all the devotees of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Nityananda Prabhu is the topmost branch of the indestructible tree of eternal love of Godhead. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I offer my respectful obeisances to all the sub-branches of the topmost branch, of that topmost branch. Oh good, you're pulling it up on the screen. Sri Nityananda Prabhu is an extremely heavy branch of the Sri Chaitanya tree. From that branch grow many branches and other sub-branches. Watered by the desire of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, these branches and sub-branches have grown unlimitedly and covered the entire world with fruits and flowers. These branches and sub-branches of devotees are innumerable and unlimited. Who could count them? For my personal purification, I shall try to enumerate only the most prominent among them. So, here's a purport by Srila Prabhupada. One should not write books or essays on transcendental subject matters for material name, fame, or profit. Transcendental literatures must be written under the direction of superior authority because it is not meant for material purposes. If one tries to write under a superior authority, he becomes purified. All Krishna conscious activities should be undertaken for personal purification, apana sodite, not for material gain. After Nityānanda Prabhu, the greatest branch is Virabhadra Goswami, who also has innumerable branches and sub-branches. It is not possible to describe them all. So I'll read some of these and some I won't. This one's got a long purport, but since we're just getting into it, I'll read a little bit of it. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhasya, Virabhadra Goswami was a direct son of Sri Nityānanda Prabhu and a disciple of Jhanavi Devi. His real mother was Vasudha. In the Gauraganodesha Deepika, 67, he is mentioned as an incarnation of Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. Therefore, Virabhadra Goswami is non-different from Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In a village of the name Jamakapur in the district of Hooghly, Virabhadra Goswami had a disciple named Yadunatacharya, who had two daughters, a real daughter named Srimati and a foster daughter named Narayani. Both these daughters married, and they are mentioned in the Bhakti Ratnakara, 13th wave. So I'm going to move on to the next one here. Although Virabhadra Goswami was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he presented himself as a great devotee. And although the Supreme Godhead is transcendental to all Vedic injunctions, he strictly followed all Vedic rituals. He is the main pillar in the hall of devotional service erected by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He knew within himself that he acted as the Supreme Lord Vishnu, but externally he was prideless. We're getting some technical difficulties. No, okay. We're on 11:11, text 11 of chapter 11. Now here's 11:12. I therefore take shelter of the lotus feet of Virabhadra Goswami, so that by his mercy my great desire to write Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will be properly guided. Two devotees of Lord Chaitanya named Sri Ramdas and Gadadhar Das always lived with Sri Virabhadra Goswami. So Sri Ramdas, later known as Abhiram Thakur, was one of the 12 Gopalas. Now, this is where we first hear about the Gopalas. There are 12 of them, so sometimes they're called Dwadasa Gopalas. So, Dwadasa means 12. Sri Ramdas, later known as Abhiram Thakur, was one of the 12 Gopalas, or cowherd boys, of Sri Nityānanda Prabhu. In the Gauraganodesha Deepika 126, it states that Sri Ramdas was formerly Sri Dham. In the Bhakti Ratnakara 4th wave, there is a description of Sri Abhiram Thakur by the order of Sri Nityānanda Prabhu. Abhiram Thakur became a great acharya and preacher of the Chaitanya cult of devotional service. He was a very influential personality, and non-devotees were very much afraid of him. Empowered by Sri Nityānanda Prabhu, he was always in ecstasy and was extremely kind to all fallen souls. It is said that if he offered obeisances to any stone other than a shalagram shila, it would immediately fracture. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya, 10 miles southwest of Chanpadanga railway station is the narrow gauge railway line from Howrah in Calcutta to Amta, the village in the Hooghly district, is a small town named Kanakula Krishna Nagar, where the temple in which Abhiram Thakur worshipped is situated. During the rainy season, when this area is inundated with water, people must go there by another line, which is now called the Southeastern Railway. On this line, there is a station named Kolagata, from which one has to go by steamer to Ranichaka. So this is some more descriptions of various places that are associated with Ramdas or Abhiram Thakur. When Nityānanda Prabhu was ordered to go to Bengal to preach, these two devotees, Sri Ram Das and Gadadhar Das, were ordered to go with him. Thus, they are sometimes counted among the devotees of Lord Chaitanya and sometimes among the devotees of Lord Nityānanda. Similarly, Madhava Ghosh and Vasudev Ghosh belong to both groups of devotees simultaneously. So this gives some more descriptions of them. We are at verse 16 here, and the verse that actually describes our Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura is up in 39, so I'm going to move forward a little bit here. Ramdas, one of the chief branches, was full of fraternal love of Godhead. He made a flute from a stick with 16 knots. Sri Gadadhar Das was always fully absorbed in ecstasy as a gopi. In this house, Lord Nityānanda enacted the drama Dhanakali. Sri Madhava Ghosh was principal performer of kirtan. While he sang, Nityānanda Prabhu danced. When Vasudev Ghosh described Lord Chaitanya and Nityānanda while performing kirtan, even wood and stone would melt upon hearing it. There were many extraordinary activities performed by Murari, the great devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sometimes in his ecstasy, he would slap the cheek of a tiger, and sometimes he would play with a venomous snake. So kids, don't try this at home. This is the idea that some devotees of the Supreme Lord perform non-usual pastimes, and in this case, Murari was one such devotee. And of course, here in the Purport, Prabhupada gives us more clues about where he lived. So we're hearing about principal devotees of Nityānanda, and we're hearing also about some of the Gopalas. So sometimes some of these are both intimate associates of Nityānanda and Gopalas, and in some cases they're just intimate associates of Nityānanda. So all the associates of Nityānanda were formerly cowherd boys in Vrajabhumi. Their symbolic representations were the horns and sticks they carried. Their cowherd dress and peacock plumes. Their symbolic representations were the horns and sticks they carried, their cowherd dress, and the peacock plumes on their heads. So Janava Mata is also within the list of Lord Nityananda's followers. She is described in Gaura Ganodesha Deepika as Ananga Manjari of Vrindavan. All the devotees who are followers of Janava Mata are counted within the list of Sri Nityānanda Prabhu's devotees. The physician Raghunath was also known as Upadhyaya, who was so great a devotee that simply by seeing him one would awaken his dormant love of Godhead. Sundarananda, another branch of Sri Nityānanda Prabhu, was Lord Nityananda's most intimate servant. Lord Nityananda Prabhu perceived the life of Brajabhumi in his company. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākura writes in his Anubhashya, in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Antyakanda chapter 5, it is stated that Sundarananda was an ocean of love of Godhead and the chief associate of Nityānanda Prabhu. In the Gauragandadesha Deepika 127, he is stated to have been Sudam in Krishna Lila. Thus he was one of the 12 cowherd boys who came down with Balaram when he descended as Nityānanda Prabhu. The holy place where Sundarananda lived is situated in the village known as Maheshapur, which is about 14 miles east of the Majadiya railway station in the Eastern Railway from Calcutta to Burdwan. So again, we get deep into the description of the place where, in this case, Sundarananda was living. So we're hearing about these 12 Gopalas, we're hearing about how they come with Balaram, and now we're hearing about another associate of Nityananda. Kamalakara Pipalai is said to have been the third Gopala. So I've forgotten what number 1 and 2 were, but we're now hearing about Gopala number 3. There are 12, as we said, in total. And our Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura is number 10. So Kamalakara Pipalai is said to have been the third Gopala. His behavior and love of Godhead were uncommon, and thus he is celebrated all over the world. So now we have Prabhupada describing how you get by railway to his location of his birthplace and activities. Suryadas Sarakela and his younger brother Krishnadas Sarakela both possessed firm faith in Nityananda Prabhu. They were a reservoir of love of Godhead. Gauridas Pandit, the emblem of the most elevated devotional service and love of Godhead, had the greatest potency to receive and deliver such love. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākura writes in his Anubhashya, it is said that Gauridas Pandit was always patronized by King Krishnadas, the son of Harihoda. Gauridas Pandit lived in the village of Shaligram, which is situated a few miles from the railway station of Mudagacha. And later he came to reside in Ambika Kalna. It is stated in the Gauragandadesha Deepika that formerly he was Subal of the cowherd boyfriends of Krishna, and Balaram in Vrindavan. So, the next verse here. Making Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda the lords of his life, Gauridas Pandit sacrificed everything for the service of Lord Nityānanda, even the fellowship of his own family. The 13th important devotee of Sri Nityānanda Prabhu was Pandit Purandara, who moved in the ocean of love of Godhead, just like the Mandara hill. So, of course, that's the hill that was used as a churning rod. And here we get it's easy to get confused because they're enumerating the branches of the Nityananda tree, and they're also enumerating the Gopalas. So he's not the 13th Gopal. There's no 13th Gopal. He's the 13th important devotee in the Chaitanya tree. Pandit Purandara met Nityananda Prabhu at Kadadaha. When Nityananda Prabhu visited this village, he danced very uncommonly, and his dancing captivated Purandara Pandit. The Pandit was in the top of a tree, and upon seeing the dancing of Nityananda, he jumped down to the ground and proclaimed himself to be Angada, one of the devotees in the camp of Hanuman during the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra. So we see these playful, like cowherd boyfriend type of activities going on in the Nityananda camp. Parameshvara Das was said to be the fifth Gopal of Krishna Lila, completely surrendered to the lotus feet of Nityananda. Anyone who remembers his name, Parameshvara Das, will get love of Krishna very easily. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākura writes in his Anubhasya that Chaitanya Bhagavat states that Parameshvara Das, known sometimes as Parameshvari Das, was the life and soul of Nityananda Prabhu. The body of Parameshvara Das was the place of Lord Nityananda's pastimes. Parameshvara, who lived for some time at Kadadaha village, was always filled with the ecstasy of a cowherd boy. Formerly, he was Arjuna, a friend of Krishna, and Balaram. He was the fifth among the 12 Gopalas. So we're up to Gopala number 5 here. And it also mentions that he accompanied Srimati Janavi Devi when she performed the festival at Kaitari. Oh, that's a very important event. Jagadisha Pandit, the 15th branch of Lord Nityananda's followers, was the deliverer of the entire world. Devotional love of Krishna showered from him like torrents of rain. See if he's one of the Gopalas. I don't see any mention of it, so we'll move on here. The 16th dear servant of Nityananda Prabhu was Dhananjaya Pandit. He was very much renounced and always merged in love of Krishna. Mahesha Pandit was the 7th of the 12 Gopalas and was very liberal. In great love of Krishna, he danced to the beating of a kettle drum like a madman. So we have people dancing to kettle drums, it seems to be, or drums is a feature of the Nityananda group. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākura writes in his Anubhasya, the village of Mahesha Pandit, which is known as Palapada, is situated in the district of Nadia, within the forest, about 1 mile south of Chakadaha railway station. The Ganges flows nearby. It is said that formerly Mahesha Pandit lived on the eastern side of Jirat, in the village known as Mahishapur or Yashipur. And when Mahishapur merged into the riverbed of the Ganges, the deities were brought to Palapada, which is situated in the midst of various villages such as Beledunga and Berigram, Sukasagara, Chandude, and Manasapota. There are about 14 villages, and the entire neighborhood is known as Panchanaga Paragana. Okay, so it doesn't mention what his name was as a cowherd boy. At any rate, here's the next one. Puruṣottama Pandit a resident of Navadvip, was the 8th Gopala. He would become almost mad as soon as he heard the holy name of Nityānanda Prabhu. It is stated in the Chaitanya Bhagavat that Puruṣottama Pandit was born in Navadvip and was a great devotee of Nityānanda Prabhu. As one of the 12 Gopalas, his former name was Stoka Krishna. Now this is not Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura, this is Puruṣottama Pandit. I think evidently there are two with a very similar name, so we have to be kind of careful not to get them confused. But we're getting close now. Balaram Das always fully tasted the nectar of love of Krishna. Upon hearing the name of Nityānanda Prabhu, he would become greatly maddened. Yadunath Kavichandra was a great devotee. Lord Nityananda Prabhu always danced in his heart. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Madhya Kanda, chapter 1, it is said that a gentleman known as Ratnagarbha Acharya was a friend of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's father. They had been residents of the same village. Ratnagarbha Acharya had 3 sons, Krishnadas, Jiva, and Yadunath Kavichandra. The 21st devotee of Sri Nityananda in Bengal was Krishnadas Brahmana, who was a first-class servant of the Lord. In this verse, the word Radhe refers to Radhadesh, the part of Bengal where the Ganges does not flow. The 22nd devotee of Lord Nityananda Prabhu was Kala Krishnadas, who was the 9th cowherd boy. He was a first-class Vaishnava and did not know anything beyond Nityananda Prabhu. In the Gaura Ganodesha Deepika 132, it is said that Kala Krishnadas, who was also known as Kaliya Krishnadas, was formerly a Gopa cowherd boy of the name Lavanga. He was one of the 12 cowherd boys. And so now we are getting to where we wanted to get to about Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura. The 23rd and 24th prominent devotees of Nityānanda Prabhu were Sadashiva Kaviraj and his son Puruṣottama Das, who was the 10th Gopala. So this is finally we're getting to Puruṣottama Das, and we hear about his father Sadashiva Kaviraj. And now we'll hear about Puruṣottama Das, who's described in this 39th verse, I think it is. Of 11th chapter of Adi Lila. From birth, Puruṣottama Das was merged in the service of the lotus feet of Lord Nityānanda Prabhu, and he always engaged in childish play with Lord Krishna. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya, Sadashiva Kaviraj and Nagara Puruṣottama, so that's evidently another name for Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura, Nagara Puruṣottama, who were father and son, are described in Chaitanya Bhagavat as Mahabhagyavan, greatly fortunate. They belong to the Vaidya caste of physicians. Text 156 of the Gaura Ganodesha Deepika says that Chandravali, a most beloved gopi of Krishna, later took birth as Sadashiva Kaviraj. In text 194 and 200, it is said that Kangsari Sen, the father of Sadashiva Kaviraj, was formerly the gopi named Ratnavali in Krishna's pastimes. So this is his family line. So his father Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura's father is named Sadashiva Kaviraj, and Sadashiva's father, I don't know if they list his name here, a commissary Sena, right? So that's Sadashiva's father, or Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura's grandfather. Was formerly the gopi named Ratnavali. In Krishna's pastimes, all the family members of Sadashiva Kaviraj were great devotees of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura sometimes lived at Sukasagara near the Chakadaha and Simurali railway station. All the deities installed by Puruṣottama Ṭhākura were formerly situated in Beledunga Gram. But when the temple was destroyed, the deities were brought to Sukasagara. When the temple merged into the bed of the Ganges, the deities were brought with Janavamata's deity to Sahebadunga Bedigram. Sahedabunga Bedigram. Since that place also has been destroyed, all the deities are now situated in the village named Chandudhegram, which is situated 1 mile up from Palapada, as referred to above. So we read a little bit about this earlier in this narration. Evidently, in, as we know, the area of Bengal, since it's a delta region, the waters shift constantly as the rivers flow, and sometimes there is a flood and the river changes course, and a city that was once there ceases to exist, and then alternatively some land that was underwater suddenly becomes available for people to do things. And that's why sometimes there is great confusion, and there was for a long time, about where the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya actually took place, because these shifting river patterns cause cities to change their boundaries and their locations, and sometimes what was once a city no longer exists because it's at the bottom of the river, and what was once at the bottom of the river is now a city. So both things happen, and as you can imagine, that sometimes deities have to be moved when such events take place. So here is, we're going to hear about the son of Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura. Sri Kanu Thakur, a very respectable gentleman, was the son of Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura. He was such a great devotee that Lord Krishna always lived in his body. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur writes in his Anubhasya, to go to the headquarters of Kanu Thakur, one has to proceed by boat from Jarikanda Gata station to the river known as Kapotaksha. Otherwise, if one goes about 2 or 2.5 miles from the Jikargachi Ghata station, he can see Bodhakana, the headquarters of Kanu Thakur. The son of Sadashiva was Puruṣottama Ṭhākura, and his son was Kanu Thakur. The descendants of Kanu Thakur know him as Nagara Puruṣottam. He was the cowherd boy named Dham during Krishna Lila. It is said that just after the birth of Kanu Thakur, his mother Janava died. So this is also another kind of seemingly confusing point, because evidently Puruṣottama Ṭhākura's wife was named Janava, and so is Nityananda's wife, so they're not the same person. He was the cowherd boy named Dham during Krishna Lila. It is said that just after the birth of Kanu Ṭhākura, his mother Janava died. When he was about 12 years old, Sri Nityānanda Prabhu took him to his home in Kadadaha. It is ascertained that Kanu Ṭhākura was born sometime in the Bengali year 942 or our year 1535. It is said that he took birth on the Rath Yatra day because he was a great devotee of Lord Krishna from the very beginning of his life. Sri Nityānanda Prabhu gave him the name Shishu Krishnadas. When he was 5 years old, he went to Vrindavan with Janava Mata and the Goswamis. Upon seeing the ecstatic symptoms of Kanu Ṭhākura, gave him the name Kanai Ṭhākura. When he was 5 years old, he went to Vrindavan with Janava Mata and the Goswamis. Upon seeing the ecstatic symptoms of Kanu Ṭhākura, gave him the name Kanai Ṭhākura. Also, the Goswamis were the ones that gave him the name Kanai Ṭhākura. Okay, I couldn't follow that sentence. In the family of Kanu Ṭhākura is a Radha Krishna deity known as Pranavallabha. It is said that this family worshipped this deity long before the appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When there was a Maharashtrian invasion of Bengal, the family of Kanu Ṭhākura was scattered, and after the invasion, one Hari Krishna Goswami of that family came back to their original home, Bodhakana, and reestablished the Pranavallabha deity. The descendants of the family still engage in the service of Pranavallabha. Kanu Ṭhākura was present during the Kaitari Utsava, when Jahnavi Devi and Virabhadra Goswami were also present. One of Kanu Ṭhākura's family members, Madhuacharya, married the daughter of Sri Nityānanda Prabhu, who was named Ganga Devi. Both Puruṣottama Ṭhākura and Kanu Ṭhākura had many disciples from Brahmana families. Most of the disciplic descendants of Kanu Ṭhākura now reside in the village named Gadabeta by the river Shilavati in the Midnapur district. All right, so that discusses our Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura, who was the 10th Gopala, and evidently his son is the next 11th Gopala. And we've heard a little bit about all of the Gopalas except for the 12th one. I forget who the 12th one is, but what's that? Gopal Champu. Okay, so these Gopalas are intimate associates of Nityānanda Prabhu, and by hearing about them, we become blessed, and by thinking about the pastimes that they engaged in, we understand that much of Radha Desh was evangelized. In other words, this was the part of Bengal that they did their preaching in. So Nityananda was in one area and Lord Chaitanya was in another area. And in this way, principally, the region of Bengal was saturated with Krishna consciousness coming directly from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And for that matter, still is today. So if there was a homeland or a native region of Vaishnava tradition, then one candidate for being this central homeland would be, of course, Bengal. And Prabhupada mentions that it's natural for Bengalis to have a reverence for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to have a reverence for Nityānanda, to understand these things, to have a culture based on the process of hearing and chanting, especially the holy name of Krishna, to have an understanding of the gopis, all these kinds of things. Whereas if we look in other places in India, not so much, but this is kind of the homeland. So we've talked a little bit about Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura. In my imperfect way, I tried to do a little recap of what's there in Adi Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita, 11th chapter, which is how the chapter opens up, discussing these dear devotees to Nityānanda and his branch of the tree, and it begins to enumerate along with them these 12 Gopalas, and we get to 10 and 11 and 12 finally. So all of these Gopalas are part of Lord Nityananda's associates, and because they're part of Nityananda's associates, they're also counted as Lord Chaitanya's associates, because Nityananda is an associate of Lord Chaitanya. So I will see if there are any questions or whatever. I'm not sure I'll be able to answer any of them, because I'm kind of not so well versed in these particular pastimes, but they are very interesting and very sweet when we try to hear about them and meditate on them. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I appreciated that you elucidated on this part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita today, and took the time to read and show us what's there. So I was just thinking that we hear often that everything's in Prabhupada's books, but I know myself and maybe others struggle with maybe giving thorough and repeated readings of Prabhupada's books.
Doing what?
Giving thorough and repeating, or thoroughly and repeatedly reading Prabhupada's books to actually see that everything is there. Or, it's like something like that. It wasn't, I read the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita, but I don't remember that. It's not even,
Me neither.
So it's like, what would do you have any tips, of the trade you can share with us, how you can, remember these past, and maybe, or that we should again and again go back to Prabhupada's books, even though we've read them maybe many times before.
Yeah, I think that's a good realization. I have that same realization, that the more you look at Prabhupada's books, the more you see there is there. And there's no way to encompass the entirety of Prabhupada's books. But we start with the basics, Bhagavad Gita and Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and eventually we move into Chaitanya Charitamrita. And just like with chanting the holy name, it's easy to do it in a somewhat absent-minded manner. And oftentimes, when we read things like this, there are so many kind of novel things and confusing things and things with the same name, but they're not the same thing, that you have to kind of stop and pause and untangle things and sort of run a little movie in your brain about what this would look like, and what's happening. And I find it helps to do things that way. And there's always something going to be new coming up in Krishna consciousness, no matter how long you've been in Krishna consciousness. And there's always the chance that when you're either in class or giving class, that you'll run across some area or some part of the philosophy or the pastimes or whatever it is that strikes us as unfamiliar. And this is a good opportunity to think, wow, I never thought about this before. And now I get a chance to try to go in there and see if I can understand it and put it into a larger context. Again, I really have never focused much on the Dwadasa Gopalas, but there are many people who write about them. And from what I understand, there's much more information in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, but I don't have a full copy of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, so I couldn't reference that. But we have what Prabhupada writes for us in the Caitanya Charitamrita. And what I always find interesting about pastimes like this is that everything is there in Krishna's pastimes, not only philosophy, but the sweetness of the interaction between devotees, which I can relate to in the sense of I can understand how wonderful it must be. But I myself am very distant from that, so I'm trying to put myself in that consciousness of trying to grasp what that must have been like, and to see that some of these very elevated devotees had very, idiomatic or very idiosyncratic ways of dealing with the world around them. They were in a high level of devotional service, and they jumped down from tops of trees, or use a log as a flute, or all these kinds of bizarre pastimes that and to them it didn't matter at all what other people thought or any of these kinds of things. So to us they might strike us as unusual or interesting or even humorous, and that's all right. That Krishna is displaying his pastimes to attract us in a number of different ways. And we always have the opportunity to try to dig deeper into something we run across in Krishna consciousness. We take the opportunity to do it, we will grow, and we'll begin to see that, like every morning, generally we wake up and there's some new news coming our way from the official outlets of information, from either newspapers or the internet or what have you, some kind of news coming our way. And we look at that news and we think, oh, that's what's happening today. So in a similar way, Krishna is also giving us a newspaper every day of some aspect of his philosophy, some aspect of the pastimes of devotees. And if we look at it and we meditate upon it, we can try to constantly push our boundaries and expand and connect it all together. That's one of the things that, I guess is one of my trends that I follow, is I'm trying to connect everything together, the pastimes, the real world. I think sometimes devotees can sort of disconnect completely from the outside world, where, that when people talk to them, the devotee is like speaking a foreign language practically, but everything does connect back with Krishna. So if we're connecting everything back, then we can help people make the bridge between where they're living and Krishna consciousness. And we can try to be amazed at how Krishnadas Kaviraj portrays these pastimes of these great devotees of Lord Chaitanya, these great devotees of Lord Nityānanda, and how they relate to Krishna Lila as cowherd boys or gopis or whatever they may happen to be, and how they dealt with one another, how they evangelized the world at that time, particularly in that area where they were in Bengal, and etc. So anyway, those are some of the things that I'm personally trying to keep as one of my motivational compass points of focusing in on. Any other quick questions or comments? All right, so thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Śrīmad Chaitanya Charitamrita, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, and Puruṣottama Dāsa Ṭhākura. Hare Krishna.